Hi folks, and welcome to TheyMightBeRacing.com. In the last installment, we covered most of what it took to redo a heater box assembly for Jensen Healey. We were just getting to the final stages, and it was time to start taking all the pieces we had fabricated and putting them back together again. So today I have in front of me, for starters, the finalized blower motor assembly. Here you can see it all reassembled and tested. The one final thing we had to do for this was to replace the gasket on the back of the assembly. Now, the original gasket was a rubberized adhesive-based gasket assembly, and when I took this motor apart to clean it all, the gasket itself was completely shot, so it wasn't worth saving. Now, the problem is that's a no longer available part. So, after testing out a few different types of gasket materials, came to figure out the best one really was the tried and true good old school cork. So you can pick up cork for gasket making at just about any auto parts store. This is the thickest sheet cork that I had on hand here at the shop, and it was really easy to make the gasket for this. All you have to do is lay the squirrel cage on the gasket material, trace it with your Sharpie on the inside and the outside, trim it out. I recommend using fabric scissors, the good old Fiskars ones that the wife has in the sewing kit. They're really good for cutting through the cork. Do nice clean lines. The one thing you will probably have to do is trim some additional material off the inside to make sure it fits over the basket correctly. But with that done, with 4 screws dug out of the Jensen parts box, we're pretty much ready to put this back into the car. Now, the next piece that we had to account for was the large rubberized gasket that sits on this ring on the top of the heater box assembly. And the goal of this particular gasket is actually to meet between the motor and the box and seal up the air that's coming into the unit. Well, the rubber on mine was completely gone. It was crumbling to dust in my hands as I was attempting to remove it. So what I went out and I found this stuff, and it is backer rod material used for weatherproofing doors, windows, etc. It's actually used for filling large gaps. It's circular in diameter. I used 5/8 inch, and other than pulling it around the circle to get the rough size, trimming it at a slight angle on the ends to get them to meet appropriately, and then using a good adhesive to hold it onto the box, this was a relatively easy thing to do. Now, for those who have taken the heater box out of the car, they know that there's one more part. And it's a small, silly, but still necessary part. When the heater box was originally assembled and put into the car, they used small plywood spacers in between the heater box and the dash, the firewall, as part of the mounting kit. Now, as I took this apart, the veneer, or the layers of the plywood, the adhesive had completely gone and they sort of peeled apart. So I'm trying a new experiment. What I did was, I had happened to have a package of standard wood shims on hand in the shop here. I've been shimming some doors a couple of weeks ago, and these are available for like 99 cents at Home Depot or what have you. But as it turns out, they're the perfect width. So what I did is, using the original piece as a template, I went ahead, gauged the width of the piece using the shim to figure out the appropriate place to do it, marked and trimmed, and then drilled holes appropriate for the bolts. Now, the other thing I did is I went ahead and I used spar varnish to treat this. Now, spar varnish, some people will use polyurethane. From my experience, spar varnish, short of a good marine varnish, will hold up better to dampness than anything else. Now, there's one other aspect of completing the unit that is, I wouldn't necessarily say it's critical, but you know, if you want the heater to perform as efficiently as possible, it is a necessary step. As I mentioned, when we took this thing apart, it was full of tar resin that was used to seal all the edges in the unit. Well, that stuff's nasty, and I didn't want to put it back, and not knowing exactly how hot the interior of a heater box can get, I mean, if you think about it, thermostat runs at around 160 degrees, so you could be getting 160 degree water at a minimum. The reality of it is these things ran hot. I live in Arizona, so that immediately spikes my temperature. So I wanted to make sure that whatever I used to seal the box with was temperature compliant for my needs. So after doing some research, there's a newer product out there that I wasn't familiar with, and it's technically not for this, but it's a great application. 3M Fire Block Sealant. This stuff is specifically used for sealing up high temperature applications, and is actually used in fire breaks and firewalls in between areas of the house. So not only is it fire resistant or fire retardant, but it is designed to handle the high temperatures that you can get in your heater box. Now, considering that we've got our shims, we've got our blower motor, and we've got the heater box all done, we're pretty much ready to go out and mount it in the car. So the general steps to this are to mount the blower motor assembly into the firewall. When you put it up, this wire is fed in through and out a hole, screw it in place, mount up the heater box with the shims behind it, bolts, washers, lock nuts, etc. Tighten everything up, and you should be good to go. The last steps after that are really connecting the cables to the exterior of the box, connecting the electric. Both of those we won't be doing today because there's nothing else to connect them to at the present time. So I'm going to go ahead and shift out to the car, which, with all my tools being out, is actually out in the driveway right now. We'll re-kit up, and I'll show you how it goes. Alright, hey folks, we're back out in the car now. As you can see, I've got the blower motor right here. Here's the ducting point that it goes up into. Now, as I mentioned before, there's a small feeder hole that the electric for the blower motor comes out of. So you feed your wiring up, put your larger connector through first, and then shove the smaller connector through second. As you go to mount the unit up there, the wire will go ahead and self-feed. Eventually you will have to help the insulation layer out, and for those of you who have not spent much time down here, it's not exactly a heck of a lot of room. So there are 4 body mount screws in here. Just simply tighten them up. As you do that, it'll pull the unit into its proper location. Assembly here. Now if you see this lower notch, if I haven't completely obscured it right down here, that's where your tubes, your 2 heater tubes go out. There should be a plate on the far side that mates up, that seals that area that the tubes go through, but in my case I don't have one yet. I gotta go find one. So, slide it up, and again, tight space requires a little wiggling. I'm going to try really hard not to stick my butt in front of the camera. And once you get it in, pitch the unit up. Your gasket should start compressing against the blower motor. At that point in time, you want to feed your upper bolts, your shims, get it connected, do your lower bolts and shims, make sure all of the shimming is correct, and tighten the assembly down. It is possible that you may need to adjust your shimming. I can see right now that I'm going to need to do actually a bit of compression to make this gasket fit up correctly, but that was good. That's what I intended it to do. So, grab your bolt, grab a shim, go ahead and drive that through, and then mate it up with the hole. And there is no nut on the other end. This is threaded in the firewall. So once you've got it up there, simply go ahead and get the threading started. And if you remember to clean your bolts ahead of time, generally I hit them with a wire wheel with a Dremel, you will find that it's much easier to put the bolts back in. Anytime you're dealing with bolts in an old car, the muckier the bolt is, the harder it is to get it in and out. So by all means, if you don't have a Dremel, or at least a wire brush, something along those lines, get one and use it. And use it frequently, because it'll save you in the long run with sheared bolts and the like.